I think we can start now. So,
fantastic. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, possibly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for session 2 of Data Discussions Live. Today, we're going to be talking about tackling implementation challenges. And once again, we have some fabulous panelists joining us today. Firstly, we have Tatia Markland. She's a data architect at Upwork and responsible for data governance and metadata management for privacy compliance. Her roles have spanned data engineering, master data management, and technical product management, and she focuses on ensuring data is properly disciplined. We also have Joshua Yushka. He's one of the champions of the data governance program at Crown Media. He's very highly experienced in designing and developing and managing custom and integrated software and database solutions. Finally, we have Sharad Vashni, a trailblazing entrepreneur and technology exec, voted one of the top 50 Indian entrepreneurs in the US before co-founding Overledge, who, as you can see, are hosting the event today. Sharad was a principal architect at the innovative California-based software firm Hortonworks, which is now merged with Cloudera. And my name is Kieran Allen. I'm a journalist, writer, and editor. I work with Overledge from time to time, and I will be hosting the meeting today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Fantastic. So I think we just start with question 1. What are the most significant barriers to successful data governance implementation? I'm going to open all my questions up to the floor, so whoever would like to jump in, please do go ahead.
So the approach that we kind of took is our goal was to avoid basically overreaching. So what we did is we kind of did an incremental approach. And what that is selecting certain departments, certain data sets, and bringing them into the system at, again, in an incremental fashion. What this allows us to do is provide the solutions to the business a little bit faster than trying to bring it all in at once and kind of approach it in an organized fashion. So by doing small steps, it just sped up the process a little bit.
Yeah, I would say for us, we still really strongly adhere to our startup culture. So for us, the most significant barrier was probably that culture of resistance to anything that's really centralized. So for us, the key was a couple of things. One was demonstrating that there was a value to this, particularly on the engineering side, so that we weren't just asking them to do something without getting anything back. And then the other was having at least one strong executive sponsor. So there had been for a long time kind of a, grassroots level support for getting more momentum behind data governance and establishing rules and SLAs around metrics, but without at least one executive sponsor who was able to provide funding and articulate the need for this at a senior level within the company. It was hard for us to get momentum.
Okay.
I definitely want to add to that. You were absolutely right that without executive sponsorship, it's really hard to implement an environment like this. We got lucky that our executive actually came to us instead of us having to go to them and trying to get on the company on board. So that's why we were able to just jump right into gathering up the software and doing the rollouts versus having to try and basically sell it to the executives as well as the business owners.
My take is the same. I think the one key important of starting any data governance initiative is to have the executive sponsorship most of the time, and then directly laying out all the benefits to them. That okay, these are the benefits what you get out of the data governance program, because still I see the data governance has been not seen as a value enabler to create the value in the data economics. They are generally considered to be okay. This is a kind of a negative connotations to it. So how do we convert the negative connotation to the positives and provide? Look, this is not only about the compliance. It is also about literacy. This is also about data quality controls. So there are a lot of aspects of it, or the use cases, which can be very enabler to the data literacy program, where you can get a lot more value from the data.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sharad. Most of our executive team can understand like the data quality benefits. Almost all of them have at some point had reports from two differing organizations that gave them two different numbers. So that mere fact is enough of a pain point to them usually, that if you say, well, we're going to standardize this metric and this will be the only way that you can calculate it correctly, that benefit immediately resonates to them.
Fabulous. So moving on from question one, after you've addressed these significant barriers, how do you decide on the scope of the implementation itself? And I'm talking in regards of databases and departments. How do you decide where to focus?
For us, it was really starting with what data, what subject areas is our department in charge of? What data elements and subject areas do we govern? Same with the systems. And then we approach it as what business processes would benefit from this data and these policies. And so, I mean, that's kind of how we approached it. And by having unorganized data, it really makes it difficult, even going back to the last point, that you can get multiple different reports with utilizing the same data, but with different results. And so by looking at what we governed, what the landscape was, that kind of lend itself to implementing a system to organize, to add literacy, to govern our data, and give a little more insight into what we have as an organization.
Yeah, for us, it's a similar situation. We start where we have buy-in, and we start where we have some amount of control. So for us, that was two places. My team sits within the data management organization, so we control our data warehouse and our reporting tool environment. So that was a natural place for us to start with data governance, to basically say we're not going to incorporate data from the platform unless you review with us what this data means and how to accurately calculate metrics against it. And then the other starting point for us was with legal, who I think in most companies will be a really good advocate for data governance programs. And there, we had lots of concerns around how we were going to implement PII controls, especially when CCPA was passed in California. So, it's kind of a two-pronged approach there, and that has been the basis. So the data warehousing side has been the basis for, our formalizing processes and data definitions, and then the legal program around privacy compliance has been the foundation for us building out the platform data for our business in Oval Edge, and starting to manage that at a very finely grained level.
So I think this is exactly what we are seeing is a lot of other customer base as well, is that the data warehouse is the key area of the governance, somehow. The reason is very obvious, because data warehouse does not have generally application on top of it. The data is naked there. If you go to any application, like for example, ERP, there is a whole governance suites are there that who can access what data, right? So you can't see other person's salary information, etc. So all these governance policies are inside these applications. But as this data is coming into the data warehouse, it's naked. First thing is required is the governance processes. It's very much required there. Data lakes are another one where you require to have these policies. Otherwise, you just cannot give access to anyone. And the reporting systems as well, because reporting systems are there. They do have proper governance, but until unless everybody have access to this data, then it becomes very difficult that in terms of what reports any business users is looking for, And even though the data might be confidential there, until you classify it properly, you cannot provide access to them. So it is important to use the data at the right side, which generally we consider as the reporting and warehousing, and as those data to be considered as first, and then bring the data from applications with the source systems and other systems into the category of governance, because there is already some set of governance is there, but now let's do the centralized one piece of governance. And that is the one of the key difference between, like, for example, the way we propose is like, as you both of you started as a, the progressive way, step by step approach to the data governance, rather than having the one approach fits all at the top down, where you have one CDO, these are all the policies we want to follow, like the one law for the entire country. It's just, it's so difficult to implement, rather than having the state by state laws or the department by department policies, which you can be enforced into that.
So moving on from your discussion on policies there, very briefly mentioned, and it's a perfect segue to the next question. I think one of the most difficult things for new businesses entering the data governance space is actually learning how to formulate these policies and standards. How did your teams go about doing that?
So for us, we used on the data warehousing side in particular, our current implementation as the standard, knowing that it wasn't perfect. So, as we started articulating and formalizing our key metrics and segments, we basically said, well, this is what we've been using for years in the data warehouse. We're going to call this the official metric, and then we will invite the key stakeholders to challenge those if they think that they're incorrect or they need to evolve over time. And then the other thing for us in terms of just what to focus on first was both what is working well and what wasn't. So we didn't want to be the group that goes around and tells everybody they're doing everything wrong. So, and that was part of the current implementation strategy, as well as so picking out the things that we knew were going well and formalizing them as much as we could and offering opportunities for improving them, and then picking out the key pain points and getting buy-in from key stakeholders to start addressing those pain points.
Yeah, and I definitely second that procedure. I mean, we had our initial data warehouse and a few data marts in place, and we kind of use that as a template for the policies. What we approached is that aligning the policies similar to the kind of the business context. It allowed for a little bit easier buy-in, and then look for consistency across those policies that can be implemented across the entire system. And between going back to executive sponsorship, and then also we found, I mean, we got lucky that our executives were easy. It's the departments that tend to be difficult from here on out. And so by aligning policies that kind of go with their business and their department's context and framework, it allows for implementation and for buy-in from those departments to join in the system. And then also showing what's following those policies, how this can benefit their department and allow them to get the information that they need in a better, more organized fashion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Joshua. And I think that allows us to build on our momentum organically without that sort of tops down approach, which might otherwise generate some backlash.
So one of the things which I generally see is the same kind of concepts when you get some agreement of some policies, whether it's a naming convention policies, whether it's a security policies, whether it's a, around the definitions of the specific KPIs, whatever these policies are, if you get some consensus in some at some department level, then telling, hey, this department is already convinced about it. What do you think about it? Can you follow this? Generally, you get the less resistance in the steering committees. If you do not have those the laid out foundation, if you open it up for discussions, you never get the decisions made, and because this is how people are, right? I generally, that's generally is the tendency is that let's go with something and make some decision at the department level or the team level, as much decisions you can make about the forming these policies, and then take these decisions to, okay, there 4 people are already convinced, or 40 people are already convinced with this one. Are you coming on the board? So that basically keeps it momentum going towards the organization level, rather than starting from the top and then say, okay, inviting everyone and then not getting to the consensus, because it's very difficult to get to the consensus when you invite everyone into the room and then trying to get the consensus about the policies. It's just the human nature is like that, and we all are human. Yeah.
So in regards to the end users now, so moving on from executives within an organization, how do you deliver those standards and policies to end users? What's the best practice for that?
I think in our organization, we've actually had a little less resistance than probably most, is when we have department owners and their teams joining on, it kind of starts spreading like wildfire. So if say our finance department came on board with our policies and the system, they start talking to other departments and they want to know what it's about. And so we've been getting more and more end users coming to us instead of us having to go out and try and push it, which makes our life easier. Unfortunately, I mean, not every organization is as lucky to have the users come to them for the organization and to implement policies and structures. Most people have to kind of feed them a little bit. But I think there's been such little insight into all of our data over the years that the users are looking for a little more organization and a little more change and a little more structure to it. So we started, again, going the incremental approach, start with 1 or 2 departments and then just apply the policies to those departments and then keep consistent. And that just kind of flourished with the other users.
Nice. I would not say that our implementation has been as smooth. I think we're still pushing some. So we tend to communicate as much as we possibly can via as many means as we possibly can. So we have specific formal policies on the engineering team, and we have wikis, and we have distribution lists and design review meetings and working meetings. So we're trying to make it a collaboration as much as possible. We've gotten momentum at least, and we're trying to still sustain that momentum. One of the key things for us has been tying those standards and policies to specific SLAs. So if a metric isn't a certain tier, and we get a data quality issue or investigation request for it, we'll say, well, we're sorry, we're not going to get to this because it's not even in our tiering system, and that has provoked more engagement because people know that they're not going to get as much of a response to their issues if it's not on the tiering system. But also, I think now that we are starting to move beyond some of our privacy compliance use cases in Oval Edge, I'm really looking forward to being able to tie all of those communication pieces together in Oval Edge. So, from the very beginning, when users are just learning about the data and doing discovery, to later on when they know which metrics they care about and they just want to be able to see if there are any issues with that data or if the data source has changed. I think that will streamline a lot of that process.
I definitely can see that. I think a big part of our easy path, I think it's going to get more difficult as we go. I think what's made it the path of least resistance at this point is not actually, a lot of our departments don't have data stewards or someone who can collaborate with us closely. So they kind of trust us to implement the path that's going to be, that we think is best, in conjunction with what matches their business processes. So, I mean, we're kind of working with the department heads and the end users, but I think once they get deeper into it, and we start actually aligning more data stewards and stuff, there may be some changes to the processes and policies and how we implement it going forward, and maybe even how we implement change the process for certain departments that are already using it. So I think that may have been kind of the path we're going. It's something new for all of them, and so they're trusting us with their fate at this time.
Yeah, the data stewardship. I'm sorry to go ahead, Sharon.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say the data stewardship documentation piece, especially for our platform data, has been really critical to us in OvalEdge. Being mainly on the data warehousing side, it's been a common problem for both us and our users to not always know who to go to when there is an issue with our source data. So we're able to establish much stronger partnerships and distribute the load for learning about data a lot more easily than we used to be.
Yeah.
Sorry,
go ahead, Sharon. The one thing as we build this platform and as we are investing more into it, what thing is that delivery to what we consider is the last mile delivery is one of the key focus area for us. That how do we build the platform and tools so that it can be so that everybody have access to the data and with their policies and procedures and all the governance around it, right? So that is the key. One of the key, the very the key principle which we are building the next generation software in here. So I think that both of you do not have the access to it, but we are releasing 4.3 on Monday, where we will have a plugin coming out with OvalEdge, where people just right click on any of the systems on the data element and they can check what the policies is supposed to. And so that we can easily see that the tools are the enabler of any technology to be adopted. And obviously the data governance program is such a big program, and you need all these tools so that people can enable them. So we are really excited about this plugin, so that once people can right click and they can see all this information around any data element, whether it's in OvalEdge or whether it's in the reports they are looking at their Tableaus, Power BI, or ClickSense, or whatever the systems they are using it. They should be able to get those, the naming standards, the security policies. They can see all these different policies around the data very easily. And so that's the number one goal we are striving towards, and to get the end user out of it. And of course, from the adoption perspective, what we see is the two side, right? So with the mature organizations, I would say the data heavy users, which were using data before without any governance. Mostly the startup culture, you will see that, okay, people start doing the work as fast because they have to move faster. If Upwork have to come with a lot of insights, they don't care because they just want to move fast, right? So when organization want to move fast and they already have a lot of data and moving around, and a lot of data is moving back and forth, but there's no standards was followed, no policies was followed. And now after the fact, there's always a change management there. But if you are starting greenfield and then now we want to set the governance standard first, and then we move forward, then people are easy to follow those policies and procedure because it's already laid out for you, right? So if you first laid out and then you start the program of analytics, it's much more easier for adoption, and then you do not feel any backlash and changes. But if you already moved forward with any analytics platform and any part of, then always the change management is the key, because now you're bringing back to the more defined standards. And then generally, what we see it is the 50-50, and on both sides, you see that half of the organization has moved forward quite a bit without a due, very comprehensive governance policies and standards. On the other side, you will see that one organization, no, let's sit back and now do it right thing. So, but both have the pros and cons, and organizations like that.
Fantastic. Really detailed answers there, guys. Moving on to the implementation process itself, what are, in your experience, the optimum steps to implementing a data governance program? If you could do it in 4 or 5 steps. I know it's not as easy as that, but.
Step 1, definitely need the executive sponsorship. I mean, you definitely need to prioritize what areas of improvement you want to start with. Again, I mean, this is kind of how we approach it, and this goes back to not doing the overreach. Is what areas should we focus on? What can be improved, and what's critical that we should focus on first. And then maximizing the information that's available for the governance and for the end users. We don't want to just give them a small subset that is not going to be beneficial to their department and their business needs. And then once you have that collected, you need to create the roles and responsibilities, both from your side as well as the end user side. Do you have a data steward who can access what information? In the case, I go back to even legal information, financial information. Not everybody needs to see all of it. So you definitely want to organize the structure. And then definitely data integrity. You need to make sure the data is good, and then just I would say accountability. That kind of ties into the roles and responsibilities that people are held accountable, both from the data management aspect, but from the end users. It's a collaborative environment. So I mean, so those are kind of a few steps that we kind of been approaching. There's definitely probably more that we can add to it.
Thanks, Joshua. Tatya.
So yeah, ditto on the executive buy-in. You have to start with that. And then for us, it was important to identify all the key stakeholder organizations and include at least someone from all of them, even though some of them from the beginning haven't been as engaged as others. And Joshua mentioned legal and financial teams. They're almost always good allies. And often, like, the initial projects that you pick will be aligned with those teams' needs because A, they understand the importance, and B, they tend to have a lot of weight within the company to move those projects forward. And then we would also set up, a framework for decision making and documentation. Mainly there just to make sure we keep making progress. We don't want to get bogged down by non-participation. So, our decision-making framework is very, speak now or forever hold your peace. Like, we're moving forward with this. If you have a problem with it, you better raise an issue. And then, documenting so that people can understand what we're doing and hopefully hook into the process at some point when it makes sense for them if they're not engaged yet. And then in addition to getting like executive buy-in for the key stakeholder organizations that I mentioned, as we've matured, one of the critical factors for us is identifying, people who aren't necessarily at the executive level in those organizations, but have a lot of cultural influence and a lot of detailed understanding of the data. And those are typically the people who are most involved in our regular decision-making processes. And they're the best advocates for us throughout the company. They're the best at socializing and disseminating the information that comes from us and getting new users to come and engage with us. So without them, I don't think we would have the kind of momentum that we would have if we were just dealing with the executive team.
Absolutely. I mean, you need those liaisons to help build that master data management culture. Especially if you never had it before, you need alliances. And you definitely touched on it. I think a feedback mechanism, whether it's kind of a service desk or some kind of method that you can gather that feedback and discuss with the executives as well as the business owners and end users regarding the entire environment, the policies, the infrastructure. By having that shows that you're attentive. So I definitely agree that you need something for that to collaborate with them.
Yeah, I mean, I would just second that or third that. I think the executive sponsorship, the number one. Number two, it starts by buying an overledge. And then you have basically having a catalog. So you catalog it. And then after that, you have to have a roles and responsibility defined. you need to get that, and then after that once that is a big program by itself, defining all the roles and responsibility, who's doing this, which comes through data stewards, are the executive sponsors, as well as the program managers, different part of it, and what responsibility they will have, ownership of the data, who's going to own this. So this parts under the roles and responsibility aspect of it. And then generally the access management is another part. Generally, most of the organization do have some sort of access management, but formalizing it is another part of that. Okay, we formalize the access management of this. Then we generally start at the value addition of it. Like, okay, let's start the data literacy program. After you establish that, so this means that identifying all the standardization terms, business terms, and the KPIs, and putting up all the right definitions to it, and tripling it down and making standards to it, and forming the committee for that, and then standardizing that. That is another program. Then we generally are thinking about the data quality improvement program, where the feedback loop, as you mentioned, is this critical area where you are taking the feedback from the entire organization. Hey, where the quality is the problem, and I will give a credit to one of our partner is Robin Miller. He said that, when you're collecting this issue, why not you collect the amount of the issues it is there? And I really like that idea, because once you are collecting the feedback, and if you can put it the dollar amount to it, it becomes much more easier to go into all the way to the top management. Look, we have these hundreds of $1 million worth of data quality issues. So that is where you can kind of make those data quality issues, and then you keep improving them. And then once you improve the data quality, you improve that, then the later stage is basically release 4, basically kind of like 4 level of data governance is about like putting together some sort of a certification program where you're certifying the data, where the data is get certified, so that's much more socializable, much more, so that goes to the much more mature level of data governance organization, and keep growing that way. So in various programs you can start, but obviously the roles and responsibilities is the number one, and then improving the qualities and that way. So these are the step-by-step processes, but do not forget the compliance, which that's probably sometimes takes the number one precedence rather than the last one, because the compliance is the number one. I think what we feel is that enabler sometime to the good program. So there are only good things, few good things happen because of the legal thing. I think maybe like the first time the credit bureaus came up, we created a whole financial industry. Maybe CCPA will start something like, or maybe the global compliance will start something similar in the data valuation kind of compliance, so that we can see that.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that happen for us. We've collected all this data for privacy compliance, but now, even some of the engineers who were somewhat reluctant participants in this effort early on are now realizing, well, wow, now that we have all this data, there's a lot more that we could do with it to make our lives easier, to communicate with our users, to make our decisions more transparent, to make issues more transparent. So just having that initial buy-in to getting the tool in place has now opened up a lot of people's eyes about the possibilities of what we can do with that outside of the compliance area.
Fantastic. I think the next question, I've opened the floor to everybody for this question, for the previous questions, but I think Sharad, you might be best placed to answer this question first. And then from there, it'd be interesting to hear the perspective of Joshua and Tatya. So the next question is, how does a progressive data governance model address implementation challenges? Sharad, if you wouldn't mind starting.
So again, I think as you see that everybody means whether it's Joshua or Tasha, they're all talking about the same progressive nature. So we come, everybody is following, okay, start small, start at the department level, start at the database level, and then move forward with the various programs, right? They convince everybody. So I think we kind of getting convinced of that approach within our user community, that yes, this is the right model to move forward, rather than starting very top-down approach of the data governance and convincing the entire organization. It's a big ship to ship. So okay, that's why I think it's we are hearing that. So I think it's working the way this is probably the way going forward people are going to use it. Of course, there will be organizations which will start a top-down approach. We have seen this in a lot of ERP implementation. You see that, that we start top-down approach, but the first approach we generally see it works really well is agile approach, which is agile or progressive, or start small and then grow into that and learn from it and then keep growing. So that's for me.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think the switch to agile project management methods and microservices architectures, I think all of that makes the traditional top-down data governance approach a lot harder. So for us, like the progressive model is, now that we've gotten momentum, the goal is that we will be organically increasing the understanding and importance of data decisions in our company. And, so I talked about us starting with both the platform data for privacy compliance and then the data warehousing data for metrics. And now we're weaving those two things together with lineage. And, as we do so, we're finding that our users have more and more insights. We're having to answer less questions. We're seeing issues raised and resolved more quickly. And so, this is a bit of a hippie, everybody's on board with with the data management approach. We still do have that framework though in place with our leadership team and executive stakeholders, that if there is ever a really critical issue that we're not getting a fast enough response on, or the appropriate amount of accountability, we have that framework in place to make it tops down if we need to. So far, we don't usually need to.
I agree with all of it. We found that by doing this method, it definitely shortens our implementation process. And basically tying on to what you said, it increases the company focus, the goals. We're able to implement more and even different initiatives than we were prior to putting this in place, which allows us to move a little bit faster, more nimble, and just really focus on the business needs by having that infrastructure in place. So that's what's really been helping with the progressive model of implementing this.
So at this point, I'd like to open up questions to our viewers. If there's anything you'd like to ask our participants today, please go ahead. And we can talk amongst ourselves before that point. Was there in terms of the progressive governance model we were just discussing, Joshua, is there any specifics that you've come across where you think it's really helped your business, whereas a top-down approach really would have hindered it?
Again, just the shortened process of it, the collaboration by starting with a few small departments and putting those in place. That makes us move a little bit faster than normal. If we went top-down, it definitely would have made it more difficult because it almost feels like there's a micromanaging aspect of it. And it does not leave you, again, open to being able to flow easy throughout the entire process. So by doing the progressive model, it allows us to, like I've mentioned, be a little more nimble with the implementation and the process, and focusing on the goals of the departments and the end users that we bring on board. So I think that's really been helping the company versus, I think our old method where we didn't really have this in place was a lot of a top-down approach. And it obviously wasn't working. I think the change in methodology has really opened up new doors and new avenues for not only data management, but for all the business owners.
Thanks, Joshua. We have a question from one of our viewers. So this is going to the floor, when did you realize that data stewardship roles required to implement data governance? When did you realize that they were needed? And in your experience, what kind of people suit data stewardship roles?
So for us, the data stewards really, what that does is kind of bridge us between us and the business. Not all, say, SVPs or directors have time to really put a lot of time and energy into helping implement this process, these policies, the goals, because they do have, you know, other responsibilities. So by having a steward that is kind of that connection between us and the business owners, that helps keep the progress and momentum going without having to stall because of other priorities that jump in place. So that's why we kind of feel that they're necessary. And that's why we work with the departments to try and designate, or if we can, hire someone to be that go-between, that steward between us and the business.
Does anyone else want to add to that?
I think I would just second that the same thought. Mostly most of the time, sometimes people think that a data steward is a full-time position. It is not. It's a part-time position.
Yep.
So somebody from the business side is volunteering to become the steward so that he can bridge the gap between the business and the data governance team.
Yeah,
and I would say that specifically defining the role of data stewardship and the responsibilities that entails in our organization has been very important. So we have a lot of people who can create data, and we've essentially defined data stewards as such. And what that has done is given us a good discussion around what is responsible data creation, and the extent to which you need to look at what data is already available, and how you're maintaining your data, how you're sharing it with people. So we've managed to, in addition to providing information about who to contact if there are issues or if you have questions about data, we've also made it clear that this is a responsibility within our company, and that as a data creator, you are responsible for understanding the implications of what you do with that data. And yeah, my next step is going to be a little bit of mean data policing. So now that we have, a lot of our business terms tagged in Novoledge, we're realizing how many places some data elements are duplicated, and that will get us into the possibly that will be a little bit more tops down, but I think people will be more able to understand that we don't need to store this particular attribute in 60 places, for example. And that doing so is risky for both data quality and legal reasons.
Okay, so moving on to our next question. This is about ROI, and I imagine it's a question that comes up quite often. How is it possible to measure the value realization of a data governance initiative? And how do you link that either with cost savings, business efficiency gains, or actually generating more revenue and boosting your bottom line?
Yeah, that's a hard one because it depends on how well you measure it. For efficiency gains, if you track, for example, data quality JIRA tickets that you're not responding to because a metric isn't on your tiered metric system, that would be one way of measuring business efficiency. Another thing for us is the power of metadata in automating things that people were doing manually before. That's an easier one to track. Essentially, if you eliminate all of these manual processes, it's really easy to say, now we have removed the need for this FTE or diverted this FTE to new revenue generating opportunities instead of just maintenance of data.
Yeah, I mean, it helps when you don't have a full insight into your data, it can cost the company money if you provide reports with erroneous data. What this does is help organize that and put it into a solution that is clean, is organized, is vetted by the business owners. So in our case, the cost benefit has outweighed the risks and of not having it anymore. And after so many years of really not having an actual data governance solution in place, again, executives spearheaded this for us. So it was easy for us to get the buy-in, because it's great when the executives see the need for it without having to have all the technical teams go to them, say, we need this. So that kind of helped in our favor. I mean, not to say that we didn't explain to them the risks, but they understood the risks, especially when you have, going back to finance and legal, when they see the errors in the data, and it could affect budgeting, security. It's for us, it was an easy buy-in to implement a solution.
Sticking with buy-ins, how is it possible to encourage a buy-in for an enterprise business glossary? This is another question from our viewers. So yeah, how is it possible to encourage a buy-in for an enterprise business glossary and convince stakeholders to move away from tribal glossaries?
For us, it was showing the issues in the underlying data and the current processes that we had in place. And it helped with us pointing out to the executives, and they also realized that it was hard for them to get a full understanding of the data in the current process. So the goal for us going forward was to show them and provide them solutions to that problem. Again, since, I mean, they already had a little bit of understanding, it was easy for us to get the buy-in. But I think getting the understanding and explaining to the executive leadership what the pros and cons of a solution is, was critical in getting us the backing to implement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and for us, the SLAs have been critical there. If you're not part of a formal glossary with some sort of relationship to a tiered response time, then you're not going to get very much support. So that's been it's kind of a blunt instrument. We prefer to have the general understanding that it's important and move forward. But and there are teams that will still prioritize moving quickly and creating their own definition and implementing it. And so we, in that case, focus on there being consequences for that in terms of the level of support they get from us.
Okay, so moving on to what will probably be our final question today. We discussed earlier data stewardship, and that, of course, is one role within a data governance team. And panelists discussed how this actually is doesn't necessarily have to be a full-time role. However, how do you actually develop the full team, your full data governance team? How do you develop those core roles and responsibilities?
Oh. That's honestly a tough one that we actually struggled with, because what we're trying to figure out is what would be the most immediate impact on the team organization at the beginning, but both in governance and also from a data aspect. You can't do much with the data if you say, like, you don't have data engineers to help organize that data. But you can't really discuss with the business if you don't have a relationship with the business owners and the end users. So that's where the stewards come in. So I say you would have to step back and really assess what your immediate goals are, and then what your long-term goals are, and then kind of milestones. That kind of helps you put in place, I guess, a framework of what you can follow and what you need to accomplish first before you can go to the next step. So in our case, I mean, obviously, going back, you need executive leadership. Okay, once you have that, who should be in place next? So you need an architect to help build out the environment. Say you need an engineer to help gather the data, a BI engineer to possibly help create reports off of that data. You need the stewards to meet with the business. So, I mean, there's a few different roles that you need, even just to start implementing a solution, even before you get to the BI position of it. So that's what we focused on is how we get the infrastructure and architecture in place, the data in place, and then move on to now we can report and provide that data. And then that's where, like I said, BI and stewardship comes in place.
What about your experience, Tatya?
So for us, we started developing a core team more organically by, finding kindred spirits that we knew understood the problem we were trying to solve. And then as we've matured, we've started looking for gaps in, organizational representation or knowledge, and have started to fill those out either by leveraging the relationships we've established through the initial process, or in some cases, if we're just not getting engagement, then we will escalate to our leadership team and say, we really need someone from this group to represent you, and this is why it's important.
Do you have anything to add to the?
I think Tasha and Joshua already answered the question. That basically, that's what we see in our customer base as well. Is one of the most difficult tasks. Basically, figuring out who can really be a participant in the data governance, journey, and mostly the enterprise architects are the number one, supporter for that data governance journey. The BI group, usually you get a very good feedback from them side because they're always involved in that. And then from the business side, you always have the challenges that the who should be the participant from their side. Just generally the business, the most knowledgeable business analysts are the one who's really ready to participate in this process of that. So that is just what we have seen.
Well, thank you ever so much. I think that brings us to a conclusion. Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Tatya. Thank you, Sharad, for hosting us in your office today. I think it was a great discussion. Obviously, today we were talking about the implementation challenges faced by organizations at the start of a data governance program. And I think we did well explaining how you can actually address and tackle these challenges. Stay tuned for the next episode of Data Discussions Live. This discussion will be posted on the Overledge website, so if you've missed anything, you can always refer back to it. Thank you ever so much.
Yeah, thank you
so much. Thank you,
Thank you.
Thank you, Tasha. And thanks, you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.